On today's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast, you are going to be inspired by millennial, wife, mother, nurse practitioner, case manager, author, and owner of a healthcare consulting firm, Mercedes the NP. Mercedes walks us through how she got to where she is today, turning her passion for maternal-child health into a viable business model. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. We have a special guest for you, Mercedes Thomas, and Mercedes is Mercedes, the nurse practitioner, Mercedes NP. Is that right?
Yes, Mercedes the NP, yes.
Mercedes the NP. Okay. So Mercedes has a lot of stuff going on. She's a mother. She's a nurse practitioner. She is also an author, and she has her own consulting company. So that's a lot. Where would you like to start?
I can start how I got here. So I think a lot of people like to know why you're doing what you're doing and how you got there. So I can start at the beginning with that.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so I've been a nurse for a little over 12 years now, have always started out in the NICU, so have always focused on families and babies particularly, and then went back to school to get my pediatric primary care MP degree, maybe about 4 years after I became a nurse. And so it was natural for me from the beginning. I knew that I wanted to work with children. I love adults as friends and family, but that was not something I wanted to do as a nurse. So I grit my teeth through, med surg and made it out, made it out on the other end. And I was really blessed to start my career where I wanted to, which was in the NICU. Started there. We had some training on breastfeeding. At that point, did I know that that would be something that was a major interest of mine? It just felt like one of the naturals of being a NICU nurse. You have a lot of preemies. Breast milk has a huge amount of benefits for not only preemies, but babies in general. So it was really something that we did at my hospital, which was baby friendly, meaning that they were supportive of breastfeeding parents and helping them to achieve those goals. So from that time as a brand new nurse, helping parents, we had one IBCLC, which is an international board certified lactation consultant. And she was fabulous, but she's one person in I think we had 120 beds.
Wow.
Down in Atlanta. That's where I started my career. So big, huge NICU. One person cannot cover it all. So we were extensions of the IBCLC. And we helped our parents with their pumping, which was the primary source for a lot of the smaller babies from, just helping them to get the nutrients that they need and just supporting them in that and starting out with early latching and positioning. So started there, never really thought of it as doing anything other than what my job is every day. It was just kind of natural. And so I went back to school and took a big interest in newborns and babies. And so in primary care, everyone kind of knew that was my thing. So as many babies as came through our door that could fit on the schedule, I saw as many of those babies as we could. And my coworkers would say, we know you love babies. So that was kind of my thing, doing the newborn exams, working with the families, helping them with breastfeeding. So fast forward to just primary care wasn't everything I thought it was going to be. It wasn't my dream in the sense of the schedule that I thought I was going to get this beautiful 9 to 5 schedule. It was actually pretty brutal. I was seeing 50 to 60 patients sometimes, and I can laugh now, but it was extremely stressful at that time. And so I did that for a while and I was like, there's got to be something else. Like, this is not going to work for me. So, what do I really like to do? And at that point, I had moved to Columbus, Georgia for this primary care job after living in Atlanta and going to school there for about 14 years. I'm originally from New York. And so I was like, okay, I don't really want to move all the way back to Atlanta right now. Like, what can I figure out here in this area? So I looked into health insurance companies. And to my surprise, they called me back. It wasn't like listed on Indeed. I had to go to actual websites and look for those jobs. And I'm pointing that out for your listeners that I get the question a lot. How do I find these jobs? Do I go on Indeed? A lot of the times it's who you know, but also going onto the individual health insurance provider's website will kind of open up more of a pool of jobs for you. So I went on there and was like, okay, what's here? Like, what can I find that's interesting? And so I came across a position that was a HEDIS practice advisor. And when I tell you, still as a pediatric nurse practitioner, as a NICU nurse, that was one of my best employers that I worked at when I worked at WellCare. I did a little bit of travel, but I was single and didn't have, a son at the time or a husband. So it worked well. I had my rental car and I traveled throughout South Georgia, basically meeting with other healthcare providers like myself, mostly pediatricians, and work with them on the quality measures, the HEDIS quality measures, to help them improve their scores. And so it was ideal. It was great, fantastic, but like all good things come to an end. I met my husband, which was a positive of picking up and moving to Columbus, had this new job, but it was time for us to move. My husband, he got a transfer and a promotion through work, which brought us up to the DC area. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm going to go back to primary care. Let's do it. And then my face turned upside down, when I started hearing these atrocious salaries when I weighed them against the amount of work that I was going to do. And so I decided that I wasn't going to do it for any of these practices in particular, but there was one that it was a huge practice. It was maybe north of my house, so against traffic. So I figured, okay, they're willing to take me on. It's less money than I would want, but I really do like the atmosphere. It was welcoming. But then I also had this case management and kind of administrative things still looming. And so I had applied for pediatric nurse practitioner jobs at the local children's hospital in addition to a case management role. And so, of course, the pediatric nurse practitioner positions called me back after I decided on jobs, which was fine. I didn't have any regrets at that point. But this case management job, the manager, she wouldn't let me go. She was also a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I said, I came in for the interview. I think or I didn't come in for the interview. I applied and she wanted me to come in for the interview. And I was like, I have this contract here. You're a nurse practitioner. You understand. I'm going to go work at this practice here. And she's like, she texted me on the weekend, the manager, believe it or not. It was like, please, like, just come interview with us. And I was like, okay, like, why does she want me to come so bad? What's wrong with this place, right? So I was like, I talked it over with my husband. And I was like, I don't know, maybe there's a way I can still go into the interview. Like, what is it going to hurt, right? Another day or so deciding on this contract. I went in, loved it. Went in and loved the pay. The pay was above another $5,000 to $10,000 of what I was being given in primary care with high liability. Not to say that money is everything, but it was going to give me that flexibility. Remember that I wanted that 9 to 5 that I went into primary care for anyway. And so I started working there. My son got sick at some point to fast forward into, he was about 9 months, had a really complicated RSV infection, and that was my crossroads. I was like, okay, money's great. I really like working here, but I've got to be more present. The commute is brutal because we lived in the DC suburbs of Maryland. We were commuting about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I started out on the train. They call it the MARC train, and it's a commuter train. And it was great until it wasn't great when I became pregnant and my back was on fire. And I was like, if I have to be in my car for 3 hours in traffic, I am going to be in there comfortable and with my back massager because I couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, I would squirm. I was almost embarrassed, which is like, as a pregnant woman, why am I embarrassed that someone's going to see me squirming or like arched over in the chair? But I was at the time. And so I decided to drive in, but the driving was no better. It was horrible. And after my son got sick, I came to a crossroads and I was out with him on FMLA for whatever many weeks, talked with my employer, figured out a way that I could still work there because I still really liked the job. I still like, I think what some people don't realize with case management is the autonomy. So I really, even though I'm not practicing as a nurse practitioner, there's not a day that I don't use those skills, okay? And I work at a teaching hospital, so the medical team, although it can be a little crazy sometimes, I'm not even gonna pretend to you, like sometimes I'm like cradling my head, like, ah, but I'm the way that it functions, they listen to you, the healthcare provider. So you may even be in a position where you stop harm from happening, even without touching the patient. So you're constantly honing those clinical skills. You're constantly looking at, these prescriptions and seeing if something is off. Is it going to clog up my patient's G tube? And so, what is going to happen? And so I think that's why I really like it, because it was challenging for me. Because of my background, the manager that hired me thought I would be a good fit for the intensive care units. So I worked primarily in the PICU, so helping families when they were ready to go home with ventilators, tracheostomies. And although it sounds really sad and gruesome and all of those things, you mean so much to those families, even though our job can be thankless sometimes, but it really feels good to help these complex children and their families try to get back home and establish some sort of normalcy.
Right.
And really be their advocate and be there for them. And so that's the part for me that connected back with pediatrics, because we are a pediatric hospital, and then also with the NICU, because I worked with a lot of families who had children with complex medical needs. Maybe they had a grade 4 head bleed. So these are the kids sometimes that you see that are coming into the PICU because they're having an acute illness, and maybe not a child that had an emergency or had a car wreck or the things that you think of in a PICU. This is their normal. So when they get sick and they are on a ventilator or have a tracheostomy or have these complex healthcare needs, the PICU is the only place in the hospital they can go to get their care. They don't go out to the acute floor. So you start to get to know these families and really, become kind of part of their medical team. And so that's the thing that I like. But while I was out with my son on maternity leave, my mind started going, and I'm like, okay, I've got this Microsoft Word document from 10 years ago when I first became a nurse. Got all these ideas written down from like a children's book on down to a parenting book. I won't even say the URL because maybe I'll use it someday, but I even had a URL back in like 2010 because I looked at the Word document, the date on there, and it was like basically a website where parents could go on there and ask me for medical advice. So I had all these things written down in a Word document, but didn't know how in the heck to carry it out. Okay. We don't learn that in nursing school. So you just carry on, you go to work, and you just live your life sometimes. And I oftentimes think, man, if I had have really went through with it or knew that mentorship really for business was like a thing 10 years ago, where would I be right now? I don't even know. But, things happen for a reason, and I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be on now. So I'm slowly figuring it out. And through mentorship, I figured out that I did want to go into business for myself and start building that and use my knowledge in pediatrics and in neonatal nursing to help other families and help them to get the information that they need, and also partner with organizations that need, really someone that's forward facing and that is not just stiff. Because sometimes we have this idea of a medical professional, and they are coming in there and they've got on their suit and their white coat and they're just going to talk at you, and you're sitting there shrinking, not knowing a word that they're saying. And I wanted to dispel that. So
Is that when you started your health consulting firm?
So I actually initially started out as doing lactation private practice. And I still do that, but I started to feel like, and I hope this comes out the right way. I started to feel like I was trying to fit into a box when I had so much more to offer, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. I felt like I was looking for the same things that some of the birth workers in my community, some of the doulas, some of the lactation consultants that didn't have a medical background. I felt like I was trying to fit into that box with them. And I was like, why am I in a box when I have like so much experience in the medical field that I can bring into that. And lactation is fantastic. And so that was a way for me to bridge in my medical expertise or my clinical skills in with educating families. And so that is one of my primary focuses. But I was like, wait, there's other things that organizations need. And so I made a bold move and I decided it was a different project. We were talking about something totally different. And I asked a local breastfeeding center, one of the larger ones in the area that's well known, like how they would feel about an infant education program. And so I had already researched it. I had kind of like looked at it and figured out that it was something that could be useful, but I didn't know if it would be useful for them or if they'd be willing to partner with me, right? Because oftentimes you become the odd person out with my credentials because people feel like you're in competition with them. And I actually spoke with the doula last week, and she's fantastic, just really beautiful, like personality. And at the end of our conversation, she kind of thought, like, what for whatever reason, misconception that she's gotten from working in the community with other people serving families, that I would feel like we were competition. I got that tone from her, and I had to stop her and say, look, we are both like women, we are both like mothers, and we are in two different lanes. I'm not trying to help families do some of the things that are not in my lane after the baby is born and in preparation for the baby. That is my lane. I'm not trying to be everything to everybody and the jack of all trades. I know where I've been for 12 years. I know where I'm going, and I'm happy to work with other women that are on the same mission that can support families. So please don't think that. And I think it was because she asked me, could she sit in one of my classes? And I was like, well, I can give you a description of it, but I don't let other people sit in the classes unless it's like a nursing student or maybe a student that needs to do like a project. I wouldn't let you sit in there because this is my brain, right? I don't know anybody else in my area doing classes for families or for organizations on infant development and growth milestones. So I know it exists in other places, and it's probably more at like the business to business model, but I don't know anybody else doing that. So I don't want to let people sit in on the class unless it's an organization that I'm working with and I'm, helping them implement that education for their families. So I think based off that, she was kind of like, I don't know, maybe she thinks I'm gonna, and it's not because you're gonna steal it. I just, like you said earlier, when we were talking, if I do it for you, I have to do it for everyone. So I'm not gonna do it for you or for anyone at this point. So, but I'm happy to partner with anyone that has complementary services for families. So,
So, in addition to your case management job and your
hmm
consulting firm, you're also writing a
hmm
book.
yes, yes. So I would call my book my COVID pivot.
Okay.
And I came to this crossroads, I would say. And again, it was back in that Word file on my crashed Mac from however many years ago that I'd still have the file and the information that I would write a parenting book. And I kind of tabled it. I've always been someone that writes, went to a elementary school and middle school that focused heavily on writing. So I know my mom is like, yes, all that money I spent on that expensive private school in New York City and then all those programs to get my child in, like that writing component really kicked in. So yeah, I decided that I was going to write a book, and I decided that that would partner best in moving forward with my consulting business to write a book and really get the information out there at a reasonable cost for families that and have something out there for someone that is more of like I'm a millennial, so I didn't really see that either. Like if the books are out there, it's pardon me, older white men that have usually written these books.
Dr.
I won't
Spa.
say any names. Yeah, I'm like, I won't say any names. I'm sure everybody knows like the authorities on parenting, and
That was actually before my
so
time, so I'm really showing my age here.
yeah. So like they've gotten a lot of that is already out there, but I was like, I have my own voice, and I spoke with my mentor because I do have one. So these things don't magically happen, right? You don't magically like just wake up one day and say, I'm going to have a successful business and just like do it after you have no business experience or even kind of know where to begin with establishing your services and what you can offer people that they really need and how
Right.
you can really help
One of
them.
the things I find with the people that I work with a lot is that they have so many ideas.
Mhm.
And not to say that you can't do all of them, but you have to pick one to do
Mhm.
first, and you have to do that
Mhm.
one from start to finish before you move to the next
Mhm.
one. And so sometimes it's just me helping them know which one to start with, which will naturally lead to the next one and support what they're doing. So yes, I think
And
getting some help in that from somebody who can look back and say this is where you should be versus when you're just overwhelmed and frozen with all the choices that are out there.
And you know what's really interesting? I'm gonna be have a transparent moment with you
Okay.
and all your whatever millions of listeners. I don't know whoever's listening to Deanna, because I know you have a huge following,
Thank you.
especially in the case management world. But I remember in the beginning when I was trying to figure out what I was gonna offer, my mentor kept saying, you need to niche down. Like we all know what that means. Find your kind of keyhole and fit into there and kind of market that. It's okay if you do other things, but you need to be known for something. And so she said to me, I said, I really want to have a consulting firm, but I also really like working with parents one on one and doing lactation. And so she was like, I think your ideas are fabulous. I think they're great. Any of them can work, but which one do you want to do? And I was like, okay. Even my mom says I can be a consultant. Like, is my mom just like kind of stroking my ego? I don't know. Like. So like even your family tells you you could do these things. But at that moment, I didn't feel like I could do this thing. So I love lactation too and breastfeeding. And I figured that that would be the best path for me to start with. It didn't mean that the consulting was nixed, but I didn't really know how I was going to make money as a consultant and how I was going to package my ideas and expertise. And so we had a pivotal moment which I probably should have had that moment long ago, because now I really understand how business works, is just making it really plain of how many clients or how many of X that you're servicing or selling is going to equate to your monthly goal, right?
Right.
And so when we really had that sit down, my mentor and I, and started looking at it, I was like, man, this pandemic, like I would never be able to meet my goal just doing the consults. And it's not because I don't want to, it's not because I can't, it's not because I can't even scale. I could hire additional help and other lactation consultants or nurses to work with me, but my son is my priority, right? This is why I got into all of this. And so if I do all of that and go full force with this, if I'm going to go full force, it has to be like worth it, right? So I'm going to go back, write this book that I really wanted to do that's been sitting in that Word document for I don't know how long as an idea. And I'm going to make that idea something that is going to carry me further and carry the families that I want to help further. Like I said, I didn't want to just be only lactation. I am the baby person, right? In my office. Like that's what I wanted to do. That's what I've always done. It's something that pretty much everyone that is around me knows about me, that I love babies. So why would I not offer that information, the things that I've accumulated, not only as a nurse, but as a mom now? And give that information to new families that need the information. You always think someone's already done it already, it's saturated with parenting, but every day, every week when I talk to families, I really know that it's never enough of quality, front facing, down to earth information. They're not getting it. I, even a class I did this past weekend, I partnered with a nonprofit, and one of the moms asked me, like, a question that I thought that either the nurse and or doctor should have been able to answer for this mom who said she had concerns. And still she was asking me, who she had just met 5 minutes ago, because they had left her kind of like hanging, so to say. she still was concerned. She still didn't feel like she got answers. And I told her, just something really simple that I think when you're in the moment, you might not think of. I said, I think, put this question kind of in your back pocket, but I think the next question that you ask when you get information that sounds scary to you or your husband, the next follow-up question should be, should I be concerned? Right? And
Right.
so that really poses a question to the nurse that's relaying the information, and then to the provider. That's a direct question, right? So I'm going to say yes or no. And if I say yes to you, I'm concerned, then the follow-up question is why, and what can we do in a shared decision-making relationship between healthcare provider, and parent to work forward on this.
I love that. And, when you realize that you have something that you need to share with people over and over and over again, and you're saying the same thing to multiple people, that's when it's time to put it in writing. And when you
Hmm.
can put it
Hmm.
in writing and put it in a book, that's what I say. Like, I could not reach all of the people that I can reach one-on-one. It would just be
Hmm.
impossible for me to do. Even if I did it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which we cannot do. Even if I could do that, I would not be able to reach the people I can reach by writing a book. And then it's very simple, and they can reference it. I
Absolutely.
can say it once and you can forget it. But if I write it down and you read it and you forget it, you know exactly where to go back to find the information
Hmm.
again. So books are a wonderful way to reach many, many people with your talents
Hmm.
and your gifts. So for those that are curious, what is the name of your book and when will it be out?
Yes. So my book is What in the Baby? It's the short title. And the subtitle to that is The Modern Mama's Guide to Confidently Caring for Your Baby and Surviving the Postpartum Period. So my book really touches on that first 12 weeks, which we also refer to as the fourth trimester, and how to ease into your new normal, so to say, as a mother, what that looks like. So I touch on topics that range from your postpartum mental health down to how to change a diaper. And I mean, like, step by step,
Awesome.
how to change a diaper. If you are breastfeeding, we talk a lot about that. But as pediatric nurse practitioner, as a healthcare provider, I support families whether they are breastfeeding or formula feeding, regardless of what my personal thoughts may be, that every family should, try if they want to, and, hopefully be able to get the support that they need to be able to continue on with that. But I even have a section that talks about the safe way to prepare formula, the amounts that you would expect a new baby to drink from a bottle. Very, as not a surprise, like, the chapters of the book that's the longest is my chapter on infant feeding and breast and bottle feeding. And in writing the book, I was like, man, this chapter is like really long. Like, should I scale it back or whatever? And so, yeah, but I kept it as is. And like I said, it's a guide, and there's a lot of information on infant feeding. And then I have a section that is really near and dear to me, which is about medical emergencies and injury. So I touch on that too. Even though you don't expect like a little tiny baby to be like in a medical emergency, but just talking to families about what a fever is in a baby that's under three
Yeah.
months, talking to them about it being an emergency if you have a young baby under the age of 3 months that has a fever, what you should do, who you should call. Should you just go straight to the hospital, call 911? What should you do? And what are those most common things? And then I even go over some of the things that you should have in your home, like, a thermometer, just those tools that you need to have that are standard to have in the home, and make sure that you know how to use them, right? Because it's great if we have a fancy thermometer, but do we know how to use it safely?
Yeah, especially during a pandemic when you may not be able to get to
Hmm.
things as
Hmm.
easily as you once could. Well,
Hmm.
that is awesome. You have shared so much information. I don't even know where to begin thanking you, because you have, just your story is incredible and what you're doing is incredible. And I'm really excited that we got to talk today. I think that the listeners are going to find this very valuable. If they have questions for you, if they want to follow up in some way, how could they reach you?
Yeah, sure. So my website's pretty easy. It's www.mercedesthomas.com, or my email is hello@mercedesthomas.com.
Great. And we will have all of that in the show notes so that people don't have to, if they're driving, they don't have to stop and write it down.
Oh, no. Yes, no.
So we will have it in the show notes for you to make it easy to reach out. And I want to thank you again. This has been a great conversation. You have so much knowledge and you're so willing to share it with all of us. So thank you again. Any final words?
No, just thank you for having me, Deanna. It's been a pleasure.
And the pleasure is all mine. Wow, what an inspiring story. Mercedes NP really does it all. If you would like a sneak peek of her new book, What the Baby, she's giving us the opportunity to get that on her website. We have a link in the show notes. To access the show notes in the Apple Podcast app, just swipe up and you'll see the list of all the show notes there. Or you can go to our website, thestayathomenurse.com, click on the podcast tab, find Mercedes' episode, and click there. All the show notes will be right there for you. And as always, if you sign up for our email newsletter every Friday delivered right to your inbox, you will find a link to the latest episode as well as all the show notes.